Hello my crochet friends, I am here to share the Gingerbread Village tutorial with you today. This is a self-drafted tutorial, which means it's going to be a recipe and you can make any adjustments that you like, even change the stitches up if you would like, but I'm going to show you the basics of how I designed my Gingerbread Village pullover, which is inspired by the sweater that Paris Geller wore on the Gilmore Girls. So you see here we have a really nice ribbing. It's an easy front and back post stitch for the ribbing, and then it goes into the granny stitches. The granny stitches will increase along in 4 parts in the round, and the increase is here, and it's a typical raglan increase. So what I love about these increases, you can put it on, work in rounds, and try it on as you go. So you work those granny stitches in a round and continue to go until we get to where we want to stop and work the armpit, but then we go back and do a few granny stitches below where we stop for the sleeve. And here you'll see where I'll start to put in, switching up the stitch to just a double crochet worked in between the stitches. Not sure of what the technical term for that is, but what I did on the front here, and the ribbing is the same around the collar, but what I did in the front here after these granny stitches, I did the same thing on the sleeve, and we worked the same double crochet in between the stitches on the sleeve and on the body. But then when we work the sleeve in the round, it's very simple like the body. We're going to do a slight decrease where we get down to the cuff, and it will be front and back post, the same as the collar you see. But here we do have decreases, so it does give it a slightly different look under this light, but it's simple. It's very simple, it's very easy, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And let's get started. Thank you, my Kofi members, for deciding the type of yarn we would use. We're going to be using this Lion Brand Cupcake yarn. It is a 3-light yarn. We are going to use 2 different size hooks. It will be a size 4mm and a 3.75mm hook. These are clover hooks, and each one is used for different parts of the pullover. The 4mm hook is for the granny stitches around the yoke, and the 3.75mm hook is for the sleeves. We'll also need scissors, a yarn needle, and a few stitch markers as well. We're going to start with the yoke and not the collar. And remember that we will be switching, and so to make those stitches a little tighter around the body and the sleeve, we're going to use the smaller hook. So we're going to begin now with the slip knot, and we're going to start with a chain for your collar, and it will fit exactly as you want it to. And this recipe tutorial is for that perfect fit for you. So you're going to make a really long chain, and your focus point is making sure that it's an even amount of stitches, because each stitch that is going to be your raglan increase, you want it to match up. So for me, my even stitches are going to be rounds of 30. So in every 30 stitches, I'm going to place a stitch marker for my raglan increase. And so because there are 4 corners, that's going to be 30 times 4, which is 120 stitches. So in my 4 corners where I've placed all my stitch markers, as I mentioned, will be where my increase would be, but this will include a stitch marker being where the round will end. So we'll slip stitch together to end the round. And so sometimes that can be a little tricky to put an increase there, especially where you don't see a jog, but I'm going to show you how we do that. So we're about toward the end of working the chain, and the most important thing at this point is making sure that our stitch markers are lining up accordingly. It's gonna make a sort of square type of collar. That's my favorite type. And so as we are going to slip stitch together and stop and take a look at it, that's what we're looking for. When you hold it out and size it up a bit, making sure that that chain is straight, what you definitely want to see is that you have a square, because that's where your raglan increases are going to be, where those points meet, or so to say, where the stitch markers are. So take a really good look at your work, but just go ahead and see if it really does literally square up. So if it squares up, then you're pretty much good to go. You know where your increases are. They're going to be very even, and you want that because you don't want a lopsided looking sweater, right? So now we're going to start by making our first granny stitch into that first chain. A granny stitch is 3 stitches in one before moving on to the next stitch. So we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches, which makes a granny stitch, into this chain. And after we make the 3 double crochets, we chain 1, and then we'll count over 4 stitches and then begin again with our next granny stitch. So we'll count over the 4 stitches and insert our hook into that 4th stitch and double crochet 1, and then double crochet 2 more, completing our granny stitch. 1. I'm trying to carry over this yarn to weave in as I go. It can be kind of difficult sometimes. And then our second double crochet stitch. That's 2. And then 3 to make our full granny stitch. And then we'll chain 1 and then move over into that 4th stitch. So we'll continue this until we get to our next stitch marker, which is going to give us and indicate actually an increase, and that's where the corners, but where the increases for the raglan will be. So I've skipped ahead, and we have a few granny stitches, and we are about to approach the stitch marker for the increase, and this is where one of our corners will be, or where one of our increase points will be for our raglan. So we are going to continue with a granny stitch, but this time after the first granny stitch we're going to chain 1, and inside the same stitch we're going to make another granny stitch. And it's that simple. So everywhere that there's a stitch marker, we're going to put an increase, just adding a chain and then another granny stitch in the same stitch. So then after that, we'll just count over 4 and make our granny stitch and continue the rest of that side until we reach the next stitch marker where we will put an increase. So we are making our granny stitch here and then chain 1 again and count over 4. And it's that simple, y'all, and it looks really neat. You can see that little opening where the corner increase will be, so it's very simple, very, very simple. We're going to follow that out until the next one, do the same thing, and I'm going to meet you back there. So we're at the very end of this first round, and I'm going to show you how we're going to put the increase here. Now this increase actually looks a little different, okay? This increase will not be 2 granny stitches into this stitch marker. This increase will be just attaching very closely to the first granny stitch that you see from this round. So we will make the granny stitch into where the stitch marker is, but we won't do a double one in there. We'll simply slip stitch into the first granny stitch of the row. And this is going to give it a much cleaner look, and it's giving you that even amount that you want to work with. So you want to take your granny stitches out now and move them to where the new increase would be, and it's just in between these 2 stitches. We just joined them together. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. At some point you'll notice where the increase is, so you probably won't move the stitch markers anymore, but maybe the first few rounds you will. It just helps indicate where those increases are going to be. So I advise that you do that, because I too, even though I've made similar projects to this several times, I will still forget where those increases go. So I highly do recommend that you move your stitch markers. It's very helpful. So now that that round is ended, we're going to chain 2, and we will be making an increase where the stitch marker is in this new spot. So now that's another thing. You may not want to chain 2. You may only want to chain once, as I showed you here, to start this new round. It's up to you. So you're still going to make your granny stitch. That's 3 double crochets. And here we're going to chain 1 and make that double granny stitch. This is indicating where our corner is. So that's our increase for the raglan. And we're going to do the same thing we did in the last round. We're going to end this one with chaining 1 and then working in between the granny stitches and those chain spaces to place another granny stitch. We're going to do that again in the round. Each little section here, that's where the granny stitches are going to go until we get to the corner, so to say, where the increases, and we will put 2 granny stitches that are separated by a chain. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue to work this round and meet you again at the very end with these granny stitches. And depending on the type of yarn you use, it's going to look very different, going from solids to variegated, and it's a lot of fun. So I do hope at this point you have had some fun making and working with me on this tutorial. So I'm going to meet you back when I have completed actually quite a few rounds of this. I'll meet you back. If you have any questions about how it's made, any questions about the pattern, please just leave it in the comments below, or you can also send me an email, which you can find on my bio as well on the home page. But we're just going to continue in this round and increase where you see the stitch markers and keep it going. So I'm going to meet you back. Just to be double sure that everything goes very smoothly, let's take a look at how we're going to join and end the second round. So I'm at that last granny stitch and we see the stitch marker, but we're going to slip stitch into the first granny stitch. I chained 1 and then I go straight into the increase. To me, this makes it look a lot cleaner. So I am going to move my stitch marker, but we go straight into that increase, and that's where we're going to start our new set of granny stitch increase. Sorry, I'm saying the same thing over and over, but I think you get the point. So we didn't work a granny stitch into that first double crochet. It's the point I want to make. We're working into the increase. Just want to be double sure before I move ahead as you're working these rows. So again, let me know if this was helpful, but we'll work this granny stitch into each of the increases in the corners you see, but where we end the round, we're not going to granny stitch into the first double crochet we see, but into the granny stitch with the chain space. Okay, so it should be looking like a square now. So you could double check your work at any point, make sure it doesn't look lopsided, and keep those rounds going. So hopefully this is what you have. We're just making a toddler size. We're going to work in the round a bit, and then I'm going to meet you back. Okay, crochet friends, our yoke has grown quite a bit. I did a few more rows to give you, the overall look of how it's going to be. The front's going to back reflect or mirror the back. Everything should have like a really clean straight edge, maybe not so much around the collar line or the neckline, but of course we're going to add the collar later. So where you see here, we're going to be splitting for the sleeves. That's what I'm trying to say. Splitting for the sleeves and then working in the round. Now to even things out a bit, where I go to split for the sleeve, that's what we're going to do now, is I only put 1 granny stitch into that increase point, and then I make a double crochet, and then I chain 1, 2, and then I'm going to slip stitch on that mirror side into that increase. So I'm going to slip stitch to split for the sleeve. There we go. And there we go. We have a sleeve starting. Now we will continue to make granny stitches in the round for a few more rounds, just for a few more rounds. But of course we're going to slip stitch on that opposite end to split for the sleeve there too. But I just want to be sure that you know we don't go straight into the body, but we will continue to granny stitch. So you chain two, excuse me, and then there are no more increases here. We stop the increases, but we will make a full granny stitch because we're going to do this in the round. So that would be 3 granny stitches, and you're going to chain 1, and as you have been, continue making granny stitches, just no more increases, but continue to make granny stitches in the round until you get to the other corner where we're going to split for the sleeve. So that's what we're going to do, and I will meet you there. So here we're working that last granny stitch into the increase, just that one. And again, we're going to chain 1, 2, and then the mirroring side, we're going to slip stitch it to split for the sleeves with the chain, with the slip stitch. Now the next few steps will be kind of tricky because we're going to run into 2 sides that have the ending for the increase for the sleeve, and those it's going to be two sides where we've split for the sleeves that don't have that height of the granny stitches. So I'm going to work with you until we get to that point. We're not going to be increasing anymore, but we will continue with granny stitches where there's no height. So I'm going to show you how I built a little height so that the round is even. So we're going to continue with granny stitches with just a granny stitch and then chain 1 into the next chain space until we get to the other end, and I'll show you how I made it more uniform. Okay, so we have worked our way back around and we're back at that chain that we made where we split the sleeves and connected it. To give it some height, we're going to work in 1 granny stitch to give it some height and to complete this round. So we're going to slip stitch into the first double crochet of the next granny stitch, and that brought it some height and gave you almost a closing of this row. So we're going to do the same thing when we reach the other side. Well, we're going to do something similar because it is going to look a little different, and you sort of have to decide which side is going to be where you end your row. So let's go ahead and just work a granny stitch into this chain space all the way until we reach the other end. Chain, continue what we've been doing all the way until we reach the other end where we split for the sleeve and have chained it together. So I'll meet you there. Okay, so we worked around to the second sleeve, and there we want to close off this section, so to say, give it some height in this chain space by using a granny stitch and then slip stitching into the first double crochet of the next granny stitch. Now, previously we did the same thing on the opposite side, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to work granny stitches in the same chain space until I get to the other side. To give it some height is what I'm looking for, to even out this round so that we have a more even piece. I didn't want to do another chain up because what it would have done if I chained up and made another granny stitch, it would have looked just like this on this side. And so we would have just kept going back and forth instead of having a complete round. So I didn't chain up to start a new round, so to say, but we just continued into it, and that's what we're going to do. We've evened out this round, and we're going to continue to work until we get to the end of the row, which actually starts with the first sleeve that we worked. So that's what we're going to do. We'll put a granny stitch into each chain space until we get to the end of the round, and that would be right under the armpit, and I will meet you there. Okay, so we're back at the end of the round, and there's a small space in between the last granny stitch of this round and the first, and we're going to put a granny stitch there. And when we make our granny stitch, we're actually going to slip stitch to close this round. And I also want to add that I wanted to close it off like this because I want it to be able to chain up in order to have to meet the spot again to slip stitch it so I can count my rows. You have the option of blending your rows without chaining up just by going straight into that first stitch and continuing, but I didn't want to do that because I like to keep counting my rows if I can, depending on what I'm working with and how much yarn I have, if I have to play yarn chicken. So that's why I decided to do that, but that's an option. So now, if you have reached the point where you want to stop for the chest area and you want to focus on below the bust, that's where we are right now. Now we're going to switch our stitch and continue to work in the round for the body portion. So the yoke is done, and we'll go back later and add the ribbing. It's just front and back post. And now I'll show you how to make the body to give it a more cohesive look and eliminate the lines that you get in working double crochet back and forth. I'm not sure of what the stitch is called, but it's absolutely nothing special. So in order for me to continue counting my rows, I'm going to chain up 2, which for me does not count as a double crochet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a double crochet into each stitch and the chain space. So that's what we'll do here. So I'll go into the same stitch for my first double crochet. This doesn't count. And I will put a stitch into each, I will put a double crochet into each stitch and each chain space around. Now, once we get to, we work it all the way in the round, it's up to you if you want to start decreasing so that it starts to be more form-fitting, or leave it as it is where it drops just below the breast and leaves this more spacious in this area. But if you would like to decrease, and I didn't use many decreases, you would just put use 6 stitches on each row to decrease until it's your desired size. And I recommend that you try it on as you go. But when I made mine, I think I only decreased maybe 4 or 5 rows, and I really didn't have to do that, so I won't go into that. But if you want it to be more form-fitting, you will decrease depending on your size in 3 places in the front, 3 stitches in the front, and 3 stitches in the back. Just a regular double crochet decrease, that's all, in those stitches. So I am going to continue with my double crochets in the round for a few more rows and meet you at the bottom for the ribbing. And again, as a reminder, you want to switch crochet hooks to the smaller hook when you work the body and you work the sleeves, in order to have less wind passage through, so less gapping and openings that could probably be more uncomfortable in windier weather, colder weather. So grab those smaller crochet hooks to work double crochets underneath each stitch. And of course, you're going to slip stitch at the end of the row and chain 2 to start a new row. The joining line will be here, so you will want to start on the at the armpit. And what you will do is attach the yarn and now the same pattern you used here working in between the stitches, it's the same that you will use here. Now, depending how large your armhole was when you began, you may want to begin decreases. So I don't necessarily need to do decreases here for this sample, but if you would like your arm, if you would like your sleeve to fit your arm, you can start with intense decreases in the beginning or mild decreases, meaning you can decrease if depending on your size. That's why I love recipe videos or recipe tutorials, because depending on your size, you might want to decrease every 10 stitches or every 5 until it works down according to the ease that you want of your sleeve. So here I won't need to do any decreases, but I will give an example. So we will start with a double crochet, and you want to pull this tightly, this tail, so that it will get woven in. And you will work into every stitch and every space with double crochets. You want to close in all these gaps here. Like this. Okay. And now you may want to begin decreasing. And how you will decrease is you will chain 1. You're going to continue to work in between the stitches. You have tried on your sweater, hopefully, at this point. And you will know whether or not you want to decrease every 10 stitches, every 20 stitches, every 5 stitches, because you've tried it on and you have an idea of where you want your decreases to be. And that's why I like recipe tutorials, because it's going to change for each person. So I don't want very many decreases, and your decreases can be anywhere. They don't have to line up. Actually, it's best if they don't line up, because then you won't see a jog line, as they call it. So let's see, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And say we'll decrease on every 10th stitch. So that's 9, and so you will not double crochet in this way. You'll double crochet and not hook them together. Double crochet the next stitch and bring it through all of the loops. That way it leaves no space for you to work in between. And you continue on. See, it closes it up. And you'll continue on decreasing in the same way wherever your decreases shall be, whether it's every 5 stitches, 10, 20. This is your recipe. So you'll get to determine where and how often you want the decreases to start and stop. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oops, that was 10. Run over and pull up those loops and then bring it through all of them. And continue on. And I will meet you back here. Okay, we are at the end of the row. And we are going to slip stitch, chain 2, work in between. This is a stitch, work into under that stitch, under the stitch, until we get to that 10th one. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. Now here, you also want to pay attention to how it looks. It looks good. So you're going to pull it through all and continue in between or under the stitch. Okay? And it looks great. And you'll just continue in this way. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nine, 10, 'and you continue in this way all the way around. And I will meet you after we have gotten some length in these decreases to show you how to do the ribbing. Now I do want to show you how to make a clean increase. So I just started this row and I'm just going to show, I'm going to show you how to make a clean transition by stopping the increase. So instead of placing your double crochet under the stitch, you're actually going to go into the stitch where the increase is to give it a clean look. So you'll go into that stitch and then under the next one and continue around until you get to the next decrease. And that's when you're going to get here and you'll work into that stitch. So we'll do that again. Here. Let me make double sure. Yes. Just want to double check. And under the rest of the stitches. So, and it cleans it up very well. So now the decreases have stopped and I am just going to work the length of a short sleeve and then I'm going to show you how I made the border for using the front and back post around the sleeve, the bottom border, and the collar, make a collar. So I will meet you back when I get there. Now we are ready to work the collar, and it's a simple attachment. You can really attach it anywhere you like because it will just blend in so well. It won't matter where it stops or starts or ends, you know. So we're just going to take our yarn, and I wanted to save this yarn colorway. I didn't want to cut it, so that's why we have all of these extra strings. So forgive me for that. But we're going to chain 2 or 3, it's your choice, and then begin to double crochet the number of chains. So if you are working in a section where there are 3 chains, you will double crochet 3 chains. But the point is you want to double crochet to close all, to cover all the chains. So when you get to a chain 1 space, or even when you get to the granny stitches, you're going to double crochet into those stitches in order to cover the complete collar. And it's that simple. We will slip stitch at the end of this round and chain up 2, and then we will double crochet in the front and back post of the previous row. That's all that we're doing here. And I am going to meet you back at the end of the row. So we've made it back, and I told you it was going to be simple. It looks really good. Now to get that, I call it a faux rib look, because we really could do crochet ribbing, but I wanted this to be a quick project. So you chain up 2, and you start with the front post double crochet in that first stitch, and then the back post. And y'all, it's that simple. You just go front and back and front and back. I didn't have any decreases, increases, or anything like that. So it's just front post and back post all the way around until we get to the end of the row, where we will slip stitch. And it's your choice to continue this another row or more if you like, but this is the texture. That's why I called it faux ribbing. It's just really easy crochet rib look. You just kind of fly through it, but it's as simple as that. It's up to you, as I mentioned, if you want to do this be your final row, but I prefer 3 rows of front and back posts to give the ribbing some depth, but it's up to you. Okay, so we've finished off that, and how we worked the collar is the same way we will work the border at the bottom. I probably would, like I mentioned before, add 1 more row, but the border's no different at the bottom. You'll just attach your yarn, chain 2 or 3, depending on your preference, and front and back post, and that's really it. That's it. You do the same here. If you'd like to decrease, going towards the cuff, is up to you, and this is recipe tutorial, so it's to your liking. You'll decrease 10 or 5 every 10th or 5th stitch. It's up to you, but in the end, you get the perfect pullover. I really do hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Hopefully over time they get better and I can find more quiet time to make them. I appreciate you hanging in there with me, with my little family, my little noisy family. But thank you, and I will see you guys in the next one.